Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the President, petitions, papers, government notices.
Honourable Leader of Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to give notice of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022 and also to give notice of the Road Traffic Learners Permits and Driving Licenses Validation Bill 2022.
Private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the first reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022 and also to move the first reading of the Road Traffic Learners Permits and Driving Licenses Validation Bill 2022.
The question is that the aforementioned bills be read the first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, or replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Just beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 7, in the name of the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Senior Minister, Minister of Transport Works and Water Resources, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I would kindly ask you, Mr. Speaker, to allow both of the bills which are on the order paper to be taken as one cognate debate, given that they're both inextricably linked. That would be the Road Traffic Amendment Bill and the Road Traffic Learners Permits and Driving License Validation Bill. Orders 7 and 8, respectively.
The question is that orders 7 and 8 be treated as a cognate debate because they're inextricably linked. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. 7 and 8 can be read and debated as a cognate debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise, sir, this morning very relieved, I must say, to be able to bring these two pieces of legislation to this chamber, primarily because over the course of the last few months, there has been much discontent amongst persons who wanted the opportunity to be able to obtain a heavy goods license from the Barbados Licensing Authority, but unfortunately could not do so because steps had to be taken by the Chief Licensing Officer to suspend the issuance of those licenses. This morning, sir, I will attempt to go back to come forward because I think it is important to clearly explain what has transpired that has led such a decision to have had to have been taken by this administration and in turn by the Chief Licensing Officer. Because that decision to suspend a few months ago caused a number of young people, as well as a number of old people as well, who would have wanted the opportunity to be able to be gainfully employed, driving heavy goods vehicles, to have lost that opportunity while that suspension was ongoing. And so this morning's debate really is to I would have to say, urgently address the issues that arose as a result of some challenges that we face at the Barbados Licensing Authority. Now, sir, the Road Traffic Act has been amended on several occasions. It is perhaps one of the most live pieces of legislation that I think exists. Matters relating to roads, relating to traffic, relating to various offenses on the highway have over the decades been the subject of much discussion, but also much significant amendment as well. And back in 2017, the then administration, on the eve of an election, took a decision to come with a slew of amendments to the Road Traffic Act at the time, which included a number of things ranging from the introduction of the breathalyzer tests. It also touched on the issue of persons using cell phones. It also related to a change in the minimum age as well of eligibility for persons who were driving a public service vehicle and also persons operating a motor tractor and heavy goods vehicles. And those radical changes in terms of the then legislation, there would have been consultation with some of the stakeholders, but at the time, the Barbados Bar Association, for instance, had not been consulted. I recall in this chamber, the current Prime Minister and member for St. Michael Northeast making the very straight up point that the administration then had rushed this piece of legislation, an amendment to the Act, and had not engaged in the level of consultation with the various stakeholders that were required. A number of offenses were being created, Mr. Speaker, which at the time even extended to persons who would have been parking in areas designed and dedicated for persons who were disabled. And no issue there in principle, Mr. Speaker, because for almost a decade before, many of those persons who had disabilities had been engaging in serious protests to be able to have the areas across the country designated for parking and to create offenses as a result of persons who might have ventured to park in those spaces. So the legislation was quite far-reaching in terms of the changes that were made. And while I believe, and I think we can all accept that those changes may have been necessary, one of the things that we certainly criticized at the time, and certainly the general public, was the fact that the level of consultation and the deep discussion that perhaps may have been needed with the general public had not taken place in relation to the changes that were intended to arise as a result of the amendment to the legislation. Now, the biggest challenge perhaps came where around the same time, as is to some extent the case today, they found ourselves in a situation where the public service vehicles were wreaking havoc on our roads. We had, and if you cast your mind back, Mr. Speaker, there were complaints not just of the loud music on the vehicles, and certainly music that was perhaps vulgar at times. There was also concerns of people stopping at areas that were not designated for those vehicles to pull off on the side of the road. There were concerns about vehicles speeding, and generally there was an uproar in the country regarding the driving by some of the persons who operated these vehicles on our road and the level of lawlessness that was permeating in our society. I have checked with the chief licensing officer who would have served on the then committee, trying to find out whether at the time when the amendment to Section 69 was made, whether at that time, in an effort to try to address the issue of those who were being reckless on our roads in relation to public service vehicles, whether it perhaps was not an oversight in terms of the amendment that was made to the legislation, or if it was intentional. And sir, I haven't been able to find out truthfully whether it was either of the two. But what I do know is that that amendment that had been made resulted then in the age limit for persons who were going to acquire a public service vehicle license having to be age 25. It also required then for the first time for persons who were seeking to have a heavy goods vehicle license, also having to have attained the age of 25, sir. So we came to office in 2018, and there seems to have been no discussion whatsoever regarding the changes that had been made to the Road Traffic Act in relation to, in particular, this particular provision. And as a consequence, for the past 5 years, licenses have been issued to persons under the age of 25 for heavy goods vehicles, licenses, in breach of the 2017 road traffic legislation. That resulted, sir, in a call from the Barbados Police Service to the Chief Licensing Officer highlighting this problem, because it essentially meant that the service was unable to arrest persons because they could produce a valid license issued by the Barbados Licensing Authority indicating that they were fit and proper to be on the roads of this country. So it created an immediate eye-opener, I suppose, some 5 years later, as to what had been transpiring over the course of the past few years. Immediately, the Chief Licensing Officer sought, with that information, to suspend the issuance of any permits, which obviously impacted a number of persons who were on various programs in the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment. Many people who certainly under this administration, sir, we have been attempting to empower, because there are young people out there who are at the age of 18, having come through formal education, who have an interest in being able to drive not just a vehicle, but also to drive a heavy goods vehicle, because there seems to be quite a bit of money that can be earned in that particular area. And therefore, this administration is always at the forefront of trying to make sure that we open up new skills areas than the traditional areas for our young people. And so those programs obviously stood to be affected by the knowledge that what had been happening was that these persons now would not be in a position to be able to acquire their actual license, because to do so would obviously be in breach of the legislation. Also affected, sir, would have been persons on at the tertiary institutions as well, who would have been, again, under the age of 25, also pursuing courses, learning to drive heavy goods vehicles, and therefore those individuals also would have been affected. I believe, sir, that over the course of the last few years, there have been about 18 young people who have already attained their licenses. We have about 40 or so that are due to start next year, that fall within that under 25 category. We also have, I believe, another 25 or so who would have been affected by this particular piece of legislation in the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment. And it therefore meant, sir, that to continue to uphold the provisions of the legislation in 2017 would have directly impacted on the policy and the vision of this government to be able to empower our people in different areas, especially those under the age of 25. And so we took a decision to consult with the various stakeholders. We had meetings with the Barbados Police Service, who expressed obviously concerns regarding not only the fact that the legislation obviously had been introduced initially in the way that it was, but also that obviously it had made their lives very difficult in terms of being able to pursue action against persons, because they were constantly stopping people who actually had a valid driver's license. They also expressed concern, sir, regarding the fact of the lawlessness and the behavior of some of, and I say some because it is not all, of the public service vehicle drivers, and a desire to ensure that going forward, while we were correcting this particular piece of this particular amendment that affected this category of persons immediately, that we still needed to make sure that we tightened the rules and the regulations as it related to public service vehicle operators. We engaged with the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment. We engaged with the Barbados Vocational Training Board. As I said earlier, they have been at the forefront as well of training a number of young people under the age of 25 that would have been affected. And we engaged with the Barbados Driving School Association. And let me just express my gratitude, sir, as well to this particular association and its leadership, because they were the ones who reached out to me immediately to identify that there was a problem that was affecting a class of persons. Many of them had appointments scheduled as driving instructors. They had put in a lot of hours to ensure that people were able and ready to be able to sit the exams and to sit the tests. And the news that broke in relation to the suspension obviously impacted significantly the ability of those persons to continue to earn, but also their own expectation of these young persons to be able to also acquire their vehicle licenses. And so I must tell you as well, Mr. Speaker and the Chamber, that one of the things that confronted us in our discussions was this issue of whether offenses on our highways are carried out predominantly by persons under the age of 25. The statistics, sir, were not as forthcoming as I would have liked in terms of the data that is available. You know, nobody could say whether a young man or woman under the age of 25 had been involved in major or serious accidents, and therefore a different rule needed to apply to them. In other words, that we had to carry back up the age to 25 or leave it at 25. No one could say with any certainty that you had to leave the age at the 2017 position, which is that the age for heavy goods vehicles had to be at the age of 25. What, however, we discovered was that between 2018 and 2019, the accident rate amongst drivers under the age of 25 was 11%, and in 2020, the rate was 13%, and the 2021 rate was at 11%. And those figures basically said to all of us that there was not a significant difference in terms of the offenses being caused by persons under the age of 25. And therefore, on that basis, there was no valid reason for us to say that we had to leave the age at the age of 25 for persons who wanted to obtain a heavy goods vehicle, sir. We felt that also in our discussions that, and I can say to this chamber that in the course of the next few weeks, and I'm hoping before the end of this year, I would have made the announcement earlier that we would have been looking at regulating public service vehicles in a major way. We are intending to answer the cries of the public and the users of public service vehicles for those drivers and certainly sometimes the conductors whose behavior is not befitting of the position that they hold, carrying so many lives on a day-to-day basis. And the Transport Authority regulations, which will, I believe, give greater teeth to the Transport Authority in relation to enforcement, will shortly be being approved by Cabinet. Those regulations, sir, will address behavior. It will address the issue of the permits, the licenses. It will also impose a greater responsibilities on the owners of vehicles for the conduct of both drivers as well as conductors. And I think that the cry from the public is one that I don't think that we can continue to ignore. The public service vehicle culture is certainly one that I think has been plaguing us for decades. My personal view, sir, is that we have to move to the direction where not only the regulations are introduced, but we also have to take certain steps to ensure that there is enforcement. Because without the necessary enforcement, without the necessary steps being taken to ensure that people are on the roads to identify the problems that are taking place on our roads and to report that to the Transport Authority so that action can be taken, then the regulations will really mean nothing. And so those regulations are going to provide for the introduction of transport inspectors, who again will be able to assist with the monitoring on the roads to again prevent the police from having, no doubt, to spend so much time dealing with road traffic matters, but to be able to have persons identify some of the problems that we encounter on our roads in relation to these public service vehicles. The truth of the matter is, sir, that those regulations, as I said, while being reviewed by CPC currently, I know that their workload has been quite heavy, and as a consequence, we've had some delays in getting the amendments to the regulations done, but I'm assured that before the end of this year, those, the public can certainly look forward to those changes. And what we anticipate in the coming weeks, therefore, after those regulations have been issued, is obviously a public education campaign that enables the general public, but also the conductors, the owners, and the drivers to better understand their responsibilities. And I say those three categories, but the truth of the matter is that it also places an onus on the general public as well. Because as users of the public service vehicles, the public also has a responsibility as well to ensure that it does not encourage behaviors that can be a danger to others as well. And therefore, I would want to call on all of the stakeholders when we introduce the regulations to really treat to them seriously, to be able to let us, perhaps for the first time, be able to bring the level of regulation that is required in the PSV sector. We've had good support from the associations who themselves have been calling for a number of these changes to be made, and I hope that that is able to trickle down to the actual owners and conductors and operators and to the general public, because at the end of the day, it is important that we have a transportation system that works not just for one individual, but that works for all of society as well. The fact, sir, that the Road Traffic Act has had so many amendments being made to it has, on this occasion as well, plagued the CPC with significant challenges in making amendments. I certainly was on the front foot asking them to just kindly make the amendments so that we can empower these young people as quickly as possible, but I was also mindful that the Road Traffic Act is in dire need of an overhaul. And I'm grateful to CPC for acceding to the request and also offering the assistance to not only revamp this piece of legislation in its entirety, but also to look at the Transport Authority Act as well. As you know, our intention is to be able to reform and to improve the operations of these entities. And therefore, I feel that this piecemeal approach that we have been taking to the legislation, I think the time has now come for us to have a complete overhaul. The truth of the matter is that it is not just those pieces of legislation, but there's still a number of pieces of legislation on our statute books that are outdated, that their references to things in them do not relate to a modern day Barbados. And, you know, if I mention even the Highways Act, there's some references in there that speak about carriageways and, you know, all kinds of things that bear no resemblance to the vehicles that we have on our roads today, but rather to a society in which donkey carts were the order of the day. And it therefore means, sir, that while we transform, while we try to improve our road infrastructure, while we try to improve our highways, the reality is that we also have to take some time to be able to do a deep dive into the actual legislation that exists and that governs the ability of the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources to be able to effectively carry out a lot of its works. Because none of these persons who will be the beneficiaries of this particular amendment, sir, want to be driving on roads that are not well taken care of, or that we have potholes all over the place, or that are not properly rehabilitated. And therefore, it requires us to not just look at the access to getting the infrastructure done, but we also have to very closely look at the maintenance of our road programs, the responsibility of the public as well for dealing with areas that are within the confines of the highway, close to them, and to remind people of their responsibilities as well. Because I think sometimes people forget that we all live in this Barbados, and everything cannot be the domain of government or its institutions alone, but that we also have a responsibility as people who live in this society to also pay attention to things that are happening, sir. Now, sir, I would just mention as well that one of the other things that was done by CPC in relation to this amendment was in relation to Section 2. One of the concerns that they had was that, again, the definition section was mentioning things like contract carriage, hired cars, and self-driven cars. Again, these things all require to be fully fleshed out, but the truth of the matter is that the meanings of the terms have not changed. All that they've done and sought to do in this particular amendment is to try to place them in an alphabetical order in the definition section so that there's greater clarity. But I'm assured that when the time comes for the full overhaul of the legislation, the intention is that those amendments will be made as has been promised by CPC, so that we have a full review of the terminology that is used in the legislation. The fact, sir, also is that in order to make this amendment, as I was said before, there are a couple hundred people who would have received their licenses between 2017 and September 30th. I think from the 11th of December 2017 to the September 30th period. Those persons would have been issued licenses in respect of heavy goods vehicles, motor omnibuses, motor tractors, and public service vehicles. And therefore, the validation bill that is also before this chamber seeks to ensure that the fees that have been charged and collected by the Barbados Revenue Authority in respect of those said learners' permits and driving licenses, that those are indeed validated and therefore validly collected. It essentially means, sir, that nobody is seeking to trouble any of the persons who got their licenses. I am happy if there have been no accidents caused by those individuals, and therefore we are seeking just to regularize what has been the wrong that has been done for the last 5 years by ensuring that those monies that have been collected are validly and properly accounted for by the government. Sir, I want to just briefly also mention this morning, I know when I took up office, there were a number of issues in relation to the Pine location of the licensing authority in relation to the Barbados Revenue Authorities not being at the Pine location. I think the public is well aware that those offices are now well placed back in the Pine. We've seen, obviously, the traffic coming back to the Pine location, and I think that is of great convenience to members of the public. We have just completed the renovations on the old space which BRA would have occupied, and we have agreed with the Barbados Revenue Authority that by the end of December, that they will make the transition back over to that space. Colleagues may recall that we had a situation where there was termite infestation. The building had been closed up for well over a year, and there was almost a stalemate when I took over as it relates to having these works carried out. We've completed that. We've had to dislocate the workers who were in the vehicle administration section. We had to move them to the Building Standards Authority because that was the only available space on the site. I am grateful to them for being able to understand the situation that we found ourselves in. You know, it may not be necessarily the best surroundings because they had to make do in the space that was available. But such is the nature of our people, sir, that sometimes, even though they don't want to agree with what you want to do, they understand that it is for a greater good. And I therefore want to publicly thank the staff that acceded to the request to be able to be temporarily relocated in the building standards unit, those from the vehicle admin section, and to hope that by January, when we
Yeah.
Continue, Honourable Member.
Thank you, sir. I don't know how much was captured or lost, but I just will repeat myself because I think it is important for the record to reflect the consideration given by the staff of licensing authority in being relocated to another space on the site while the renovations were completed for the Barbados Revenue Authority on the site at the Pine location, and I am eternally grateful to them for being able to understand the situation that presented us. We didn't want the disruption that I'm sure was caused as a result of the BRA office not being at the Pine location to repeat itself, and therefore we asked staff to be able to work together in spaces on the site temporarily to accommodate. It has taken a little longer than we perhaps would have hoped, but I've come to realize that everything takes time, and therefore I am eternally patient when it comes to these matters. Therefore, sir, when January comes, the old office that BRA occupied, which would have had a number of cashier stations, we will have a full complement of the staff there at that particular location. The vehicle administration section, which would answer a number of the customer queries, will be relocated back to its original location. And obviously, in the course of the next few weeks and months, it is our intention to be able to ensure that in terms of the transformation of technology at the licensing authority, that the complaints that have been raised by the public in relation to booking the appointments online and paying online and doing the tests online, I can give the assurance that that is all a work in progress, and the IT teams have been working feverishly to try to complete that particular transformation. Mr. Speaker, I am told that we are having some technical challenges, and the technical crew is going to require at least about 20 minutes in order to have cameras and the audio and everything back up and running. So I will therefore beg to move the suspension of the House until 11:20 a.m., at which time I will continue the introduction of the bills.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until, for 20 minutes. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended for 20 minutes.
the wider stakeholder body, primarily because we recognize that sometimes you don't always get it right. And with legislation, sir, because things are so dynamic, there's so many views to take into account, oftentimes there is cause for pause to be able to make those amendments. I've heard others say, you know, this administration has been rushing legislation. And sir, I simply say to those who say that, perhaps they don't have the knowledge and the understanding of legislation and legislative process. Perhaps they don't even understand the history of politics. Because if they did, while both administrations have made mistakes, the truth of the matter is that we have always, as a government, been on the forefront of acknowledging when we have made it wrong, and we have sought to correct it. I am happy to also say to this chamber that things like the Integrity in Public Life Bill that was shot down in the other place is making its way back to this chamber, sir, because this is not an administration that when things don't go our way or as is intended, that we simply lay down and play dead and we don't resurrect legislation. And even in spite of integrity legislation coming, all of us who are sitting members of parliament have, and in particular cabinet, have ensured that they have filed their records in relation to financial interests in this country. And that is without any piece of legislation. So we have led by example, even though there is no legislative basis at this point for doing so, sir. I recall when I was in the Senate chamber, the Preservation of Antiquities Bill passing this House and coming to the Senate, sir, and it was shot down in that place. The then administration, sir, has never took the opportunity to consult thereafter or to bring back the piece of legislation. Okay, so when we hear these things about rush legislation, I think people need to understand their history. We saw it as well with the electric light and power bill. I was on the other side at the time, sir. It was rushed through here like the Concorde. But we have had to also make amendments and changes and indeed repeal the legislation to be able to now modernize it and to transform this country, sir, because you cannot remain as you were, and law is something that is constantly changing. Sir, you are a practicing attorney, and you are well aware of what I speak, and I think if people reflect on a lot of what has transpired before, certainly this administration should not grow weary of those criticisms, because when we are corrected, the one thing I know about this administration is that it pauses and it consults and it reflects and it comes back again. It does not bury its head in the sand, sir, to not make those amendments. So simply, sir, to say that we may not always get it right, but we try our damn best to make sure that we correct whatever those deficiencies are. And this is a perfect example of a rush piece of legislation without sufficient thought, particularly this amendment to Section 69 that has caused a lot of distress to a number of young people under the age of 25 who have been seeking to obtain their heavy goods licenses. I hope that we can get it through the Senate quickly as well, so that those young people will be able to have a good gift from the minister for Christmas. Many of them reached out to me, sir. I contacted several who called the office and left messages and sent texts and WhatsApp. Even their parents called, sir, to say how distraught they were as a result of what had transpired with the suspension. And I called, sir, because I appreciate that for many of these young people, this has been their only avenue, their only hope to be able to be gainfully employed. And therefore, I feel very strongly that it was important for us to do all that we could to meet with the stakeholders, to be able to make these changes quickly. And in the course of time, of course, we will address the other issues in relation to the wider legislation, but also, as I indicated before, to address the issue of the public service vehicles and the regulation of that sector, as is coming very shortly, hopefully before the end of the year. So, sir, with those few words, I therefore beg to move that these two bills, this one bill, do not pass.
We got a second thing. We got a second thing. We got a second thing.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time. Which one you have first, Pedro? Huh? Which traffic? Okay.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just raised today to give a short contribution to this road traffic amendment, and I want to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for so lucidly bringing this bill, very important piece of amendment, so that the people of Barbados can be justifiably happy going into the Yuletide season, especially those young persons, 18 years and over. Mr. Speaker, I want to publicly start with a disclaimer. It is no secret in Barbados that prior to me entering political life, that I had a company, bona fide, of course, a driving school, which was responsible for teaching young men across the environs of Christchurch. I see the Member of Parliament for Christchurch West laughing because the devil is a liar, according to the good book, the Bible, and I'm not the devil. But I had a school teaching young persons because I believe that if you get a license, especially a heavy-duty license, there is a likelihood, a very, 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 very likelihood, a real one, that that person, male or female, young or old, will have an equal opportunity to get a job. That was my belief then, and it's still my belief now. So, as I said, mistakes happen, but it's the duty of the government when we identify that there is a problem, that we face it and we fix it. And that is why we are here today, to fix an anomaly. Simply put, I suspect in 2017, the powers that be who occupy this August chamber wanted to, as the Deputy Prime Minister alluded to, wanted to basically bring some order as it relates to those in the public service. And the evidence is not there, but the suggestion at the point in time, the hue and cry in the country was that those young persons were driving reckless on the road. And as they're attempted to bring some order in terms of raising the age group, they're unfortunately also raised the age group for other persons who were having other categories of license. I just want to bring to this hallowed chamber the different classes of license so we will have a full understanding of what really took place in Barbados and how licenses are classified, so that those in earshot, whether virtually or otherwise, would have a full understanding of how the licenses are separated and how they are given in Barbados as it relates to who can drive what. There is a category A, or class A license, which speaks to persons being able to drive on this road in Barbados, a heavy cycle. A category A1 license, which is a light cycle. Category B, private car. C, heavy goods. C1, light goods. D, the ability to drive public service vehicles. F is for a tractor. F1, skid steer. F2, forklift. F3, road roller. And you go back down to the automatic, which is AA, automatic heavy cycle, A1A, automatic light cycle, BA, automatic private car, CA, automatic heavy goods, C1A, automatic light goods, and DA, automatic public service vehicle. As I said, in trying to regulate the age group for those persons in the public who drive public service vehicle, I suspect the anomaly was made in terms of the alphabet and how the numbers were used. We recognize, of course, that C comes before D, but unfortunately, in this scenario, they put the D before the C. Have you look at it in that way? So unfortunately, the public service and the attempt to bring those persons who drive public service vehicles to the age of 25 and over. They introduced the C as well, which is those persons who would be allowed by law based on age to drive heavy vehicles. So unfortunately, what it did is put all those persons, 18 years, between 18 to 25, under a cloud of uncertainty. And then we now are looking to make amends in terms of changing the legislation so those persons retroactively will be given the opportunity that we know that young persons should be given. Mr. Speaker, and as I said, it was an alphabetical mistake. But we are absolutely certain in this House and the people of Barbados, when they met deposed in January, that B comes before D. And that is why 30 of us assume the seats on the Barbados Labour Party. So those anomalies in the alphabet certainly is not the norm as it relates to how Barbados think in terms of who should govern this country at this point in time. I just want to say the importance of those young persons having a license must never be diluted in this country. The importance. In the same way persons aspire, because everybody can't be academic. It's impossible to have every single person aspiring in Barbados to be the Speaker of the House of Assembly. It's in the same way that it's impossible, and I think it would be unfortunate to have every person in Barbados aspiring to be the Prime Minister of a country. It just don't happen. Different people with different abilities will aspire for different things. And so young persons, when they reach the age of 18, some want to go into the business of freighting. As I said before, I taught successfully 82 persons in Barbados to drive trucks. And immediately after, they were able to go into different companies across Barbados, freighting companies, and work because there was a dearth at that point in time of heavy-duty drivers in Barbados. And I'm sure there are many opportunities across this country as it relates to persons given the opportunity to drive heavy vehicles. Not only that, we are talking about entrepreneurship and giving Barbadians a tangible stake. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, out of those 84 persons, I know a lot of those young men and women form their own businesses and have freighting companies as I speak today. And I want to congratulate them for that because this is the opportunity. It is really the conduit to provide an avenue so that young Barbadians will have the opportunity to feed their families and to be able to support their basic needs. Very important. So I happen to be, thankfully, being supported, of course, by my colleagues and the Prime Minister to be Minister of Youth and Community Empowerment. And so we started a program in that ministry under my watch called the Driving Work because we believe that once those young persons got a driving license, and I want to say the course thus far is 100% successful. Thus far, there has not been a single failure as it pertains to achieving a driver's license since the inception of that course, the Driving Work program. Not only is it a program that seeks to give young persons the opportunity to have a license after going through and I know that the phone is so excited with me talking about young people, it starts to ring and misbehave itself. Because it's an exciting discussion here, giving the young persons the opportunity to do that which they're supposed to do. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that the course not only provided them after they do their necessary training, physical training and what's not to get their license, but it allowed them to work after using an apprenticeship system with companies, trucking companies across Barbados. The Job Start program by the Ministry of Labor. A lot of those young persons would have gone through that phase of program in terms of job attachment with various companies because it's important when persons get their license to also get that experience. Because the experience is important. And I don't think, and I would say so without apology in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, of course, I don't think it has anything to do with age at all. There was a lot of discussion about age as it relates to a Senate position a couple months ago. I think we get caught up with the age thing. And with a person who understands the vagaries of age, because they understand that those in the twilight of their years need special attention. I understand it more than so than anybody else in Barbados. So I'm saying to you, when it comes to age, I think the conversation should never be about age. And I know that got some in this August chamber. One told me she dressed today because she is no longer a sexagenarian. She's a septuagenarian. And I respect the member of Parliament for St. Thomas. She has a special place in my heart. Not because she has the same surname as myself, but it's a special relationship, genetically and otherwise, with the member of Parliament for St. Thomas. I see the member of Parliament for St. Michael East walking, and he can say that he's a Trojan of not only of Barbados and St. Michael East, but this August chamber as well. He was here longer than most people. And he understands the importance of not only having a discussion about age, but about maturity. Because that's what the discussion is about. And we may sit down here and talk about an 18-year-old. An 18-year-old can't do this. An 18-year-old can't do that because of age. I must tell you, out of those 84 persons that I taught to drive, about 80% of them were persons just on the threshold of 18 years, 18, 19, around that age group. And I must say, just like any other vocation, some of them, when they finish the driving test, were extremely good. I must say, the antithesis holds true too. Some were extremely poor. But it had nothing to do with age. There have some drivers on this road who are quadragenarians like myself, who drive worse than 18-year-olds. I must say it. And they have some 18-year-olds who drive just as good as you, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I don't say, as I said, the discussion is about age. I think that really discussion should lead itself to, if you want to elasticize it, it's really about maturity and experience. That's what I think it is about. Giving those persons, after they collect their license at 18 years old, giving them a period of apprenticeship, you may call it internship, allowing them to work with companies across Barbados, driving companies, getting that experience. That's what the Job Start Plus program in the Ministry of Labor is about. Giving young people that experience, because it comes down to experience when done. Trust me, Mr. Speaker, sir. You may have your license at 18 years old, but there's so much you have to learn after 6 months of training when you get on the road. And I'm saying, and the Deputy Prime Minister alluded to it earlier, to have those persons working with the driving school association. I must say, we have some of the best driving instructors in Barbados. I have been associated with them prior to my political life, and I want to say there are master's trainers who went as far as England to get special training to be able to come and teach those persons who are the instructors of the day. And I want to encourage Barbadians to use those instructors from the Driving Association. They are trained. They went through their training at community college. They have the experience. And that's why they have been doing it for all the years. I know sometimes you like to take a little chance because of financial constraints, and you may have a family who has a vehicle, and they're able to teach you on different things, but I am encouraging Barbadians to get the specialized training so that when they go on the road, they won't be a danger to themselves or other road users. That is my simple advice based on my experience in a prior life. But I want to see it, because I feel it is very important that if you are saying, because the legislation in 2017 speak to driving a public service vehicle at the age of 25. If that is the determined age, and the DPN alluded to the fact that we will have those consultations with persons from the Road Safety Association. As she said too, there is no concrete evidence, scientifically, clinically, or other ways to suggest that young persons are involved in more accidents than any other person in Barbados. There is no conclusive evidence to suggest this. There is no evidence to suggest that they drive any different for any person who are either in the dawn or twilight of their years. There is no evidence to suggest that. So I'm saying these discussions must have the consultation that will cause the realization of a proper decision when we come back before this August chamber. So whether it is 25, 23, 24, whatever age it is, I am saying that there simply needs to be a level of apprenticeship. That's what I'm saying. Whatever age we decide, or whatever age is the prescribed age after consultation with those in the driving school and the association, those persons that work closely with the road traffic safety, the association that deals with that, or the principals of the Barbados Vocational Training Board, because they have a program which seeks to train persons, whether they're driving bobcat, trucks, or whatever. My simple suggestion is to have that level of training, because at the end of the day, they are on the road, using the road just like every single person in Barbados, and our primary interest must be safety, whether it's the safety of those in the traveling public, or safety for any road users, pedestrians, whatever. Animals, there must be a level of professionalism exhibited as it relates to those persons who are holding license across Barbados, whether they're heavy-duty license, like goods license, or whatever. So the level of training is important, and I want to thank those persons from the driving school and the association for going to that level of training, whether here or overseas, so that they'll be able to pass on that knowledge to our young charges. And I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, the most important thing coming out of this is that we are giving Barbadians the opportunity to earn a living. That's the most important thing. We are giving Barbadians another avenue to earn their living. So, as I said, it was an anomaly. It is a simple correction of that anomaly. It is for us to do right for the people who has given us the mandate to do right on their behalf. We recognize that it was a mistake. I would say that in true reflection of what happened. I mean, we are in government. There's nothing called perfection in government. The only perfection that exists, as far as I'm concerned, is the perfection from God Almighty. And I feel privileged to say so. And sometimes in the pursuit of perfection, we lose opportunities. This is an opportunity for us to correct, for the young people of this country, to give them that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to make a living, have a little bread, be able to provide for their family, put a roof over their heads, be able to have a tangible state in this country, own a piece of land, live the Barbadian dream or the Bajan dream, whatever you call it. Barbadians must be able to be given those opportunities, and that is what government is about. I don't think that it makes any sense us coming in here with all our fancy talk. Some call themselves logophiles, lexophiles. I may be considered a neologist when I get into my biodiversity, but that's okay. But at the end of the day, we must be able to do good for the people who put us here. That's simple one. We must be able to do good on behalf of those who put us here, and do good. And a certain member of parliament for Christchurch West, who sometimes use the acronym do good and spell it D-O-G-O-W-D. That is his acronym, G-O-D. I know the good member of parliament for St. Michael South, who understands the English language a little better than myself, will correct me, right? But I'm saying that's why we are put here. And the good book says, the good book, it causes me to lose the word good, and I said down two seats from the good pastor, but the good book tells us that do good is virtual thing. And we come here to do good on behalf of the people of this country. That is why they voted for us in their numbers. And when we recognize that there was a problem or a mistake in the past, we are simply coming on the cusp of the Yuletide season to say to Barbadians, Happy Christmas, good tides of great joy and what's not. And this is basically the government's Christmas gift to those young people who unfortunately were in a cloud of uncertainty. And as my good friend from St. Philip, Self is here saying, what about the old ones? Because he recognized that his hair has now turned to the color of wisdom. So I would take advice from my colleague here who is a little older than myself. But it's to say to the Barbadians, we recognize there is an error, and we are here to correct this error and to give young people that once in a lifetime opportunity. Sometimes it only happens once in a lifetime. And the importance of allowing them to live that dream and to have something in this small country. It's called a tangible state. The member of Parliament for St. Michael East know what I'm talking about. He fights on behalf of his people on a daily basis. And when he opens his mouth and releases that red flag, sometimes it may be in angst, and sometimes it may be in glee. But at the end of the day, he releases it irrespective and an unequivocal way, because he understands the importance of fighting for our people and giving them the opportunity to rise above their circumstances. That's as simple as it put, as far as I'm concerned. And that is the reason why we are here extending sweat expenditure, to be able to do good for the people. So I'm saying I want to commend the Member of Parliament for St. Michael, the Southeast, and I want to say to this August chamber that I give this amendment my unreserved and unshackled support. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for City of Bridgetown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give support to this Road Traffic Act Amendment 2022 on this, the 6th day of December in the year of our Lord 2022. I believe that this amendment, this debate, represents a classic example of democracy at work, democracy at its best, where government and administration can listen to the voice of the people that it represents and go forward to make the changes appropriately. Mr. Speaker, on the announcement that the age to carry the license at age 18, moving to 25, I got a number of calls. A number of calls from young people in this country in despair. In despair because they were waiting for their 18th birthday to be able to get their heavy-duty license, not necessarily to participate in the public service vehicle sector, but in order to have that license, because as they read job vacancies, as they see the advertisements, you would normally see driver's license and asset. Therefore, to be able to get involved in freighting, to get involved in a number of sectors, you will need to have this driver's license. So the removal of this, the ability to get this license, is the removal of an asset from these young people. Like the member that just sat from Christchurch, West Central, I too have been involved, not as bona fide as him, in facilitating license for young people through the organization Nature Fun Ranch. Organization I talk a lot about in here, yes, sir. Through the Apex Intervention Program, there's a program under that called the Empowerment Program, and a sub-program under that called Documentation, where we assist members of this organization who may be in a program for reform because they've committed some offense, or through the prevention program before they commit an offense, need to get simple things that we may take for granted, like ID cards, birth certificates, driver's license, passports, the list goes on. I am very proud to be part of an administration that is doing what it was doing at a community level, somewhat national level, but an administration that is doing that right across the board. Because in the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment, in the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, there are all programs in there which seek to empower our people young and young at heart, to be able to gain these documents of life. These documents of life that act as a pathway to empowerment. It is very difficult to do business in this country and outside of this country without basic documentation. There is an entire sector, class, or segment of this society, sir, who would like to have these documents in order to do business with this society. And if they cannot get these documents, they cannot operate on the right side of this society. I never, ever, ever, ever in my life understood the importance of these documents until I participated in some rehabilitation programs in Her Majesty Prison does. And one of the things I recognize, sir, I was just visiting, leaving every evening, every single evening, never stand one. But sir, one of the things I recognize is that a lot of those inmates, sir, that you try to help keep from going there, but a lot of those inmates, sir, did not have something as simple as an ID card. And it told me on a sociological and even a psychological level that they did not have a connection with this society. They did not have the documents of the society because they did not feel part of the society. They felt as though the society looked down on them, and they looked down on the society too. They don't participate in the society. And it brought me into a firmer understanding how the mindset of a person can work to commit crime in this country and to commit crime against their fellow man and woman and to commit crime against the tourists who come to this country. I couldn't understand it because, sir, you and I, we understand the connection. We have a stake in this country. We have a love for this country, and therefore we would frown upon those things because we understand that if we support or perpetrate those things, we can damage the society that we live in and that we belong, that we support. Sir, they did not share those values. And I felt it so important as one of the post-prison programs to ensure that persons were able to have these very important documents of state. If only to say you belong to this society and that this society belongs to you. That is the importance of this debate in here today, sir. This is not just about people keeping noise and therefore we have to rush to change. This is about doing the right thing for the people of Barbados. Sir, if we do not empower, educate, and provide opportunities for our people, what do we expect on the right side of the equal sign? What do we expect at the end of an equation where you have a society, sir, that does not seek to empower our people, to empower our young people? What do we expect? If we do not provide positive outlets to earn by having that license, by having these documents, by being part of the society, what is the alternative to positive outlets? What is the alternative? And I refuse to answer it, sir. Let he who have ears hear the question, and to thine own self be true, and answer it for themselves. It's important. Now, when we embarked on the documentation program as part of Nature for Rats, sir, it was a twofold project. One was to, yes, provide the opportunity that as they seek to empower themselves, that they can have the license to move around, to gain jobs, to be an asset, as I said before, but it was also a part of a positive reinforcement program. When we think about discipline in this society, the majority of us believe discipline is punishment. But discipline, in its purest definition, is doing the things you ought to do, and the method by which you get persons to do that. A lot of times that is done through negative reinforcement. Lick and lock up in this Christian society. Lick and lock up. Lick and lock up. But sir, again, unconnected, but connected afterwards. In my learning of training the dogs and learning to train the horses, I realized that positive reinforcement is more powerful, beneficial, and effective than negative reinforcement. A drug dog does not seek out drugs because you will beat it if you don't find it. He seeks out drugs because you will reward him when you find it. And the same goes for horses. We waste the time trying to beat a horse, especially if it is one of stubborn horses, like certain people. Waste of time. He becomes head shy, but the first opportunity he gets to give a bite or a kick, may the good Lord help you. Yeah. The horse, maybe a mirror. I hear voices, sir. I hear voices. Now, sir, a lot of the time you look across, and I'm working with different classes in this country. One of the things that I recognize is that certain classes in this country have in their arsenal the ability to withdraw certain things, the ability to give certain things as positive reinforcement and to withdraw them on the negative reinforcement. And learning to drive is one. A lot of parents have told me over the years, well, where I know where to take from she or she, don't like nothing. But nothing is on the table. But when you have classes, when you have people who are empowered, they have a slew of things, an arsenal of things, sir, that they can remove to get the children to do what it is that they need to do, or to give, to reward the children when they do the things that they're supposed to do. So there's the threat of not going to Disney World this year. There's the threat of when you get 16 or 18, I'm paying for that learning driving. There is these things that they have in their arsenal. But when you look at other corners of the society, sir, they ain't got anything to take because there's nothing on the table. Table empty, sir. I don't even have on a tablecloth. So there's nothing to remove. And that is why a program and a project like this, sir, is very important. And that is why I support the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central when he spoke about the program in driving in the Ministry of Affairs now under the member for St. John. And that is why I support this amendment, sir, because I believe the Honourable Member for St. Philip West will tell you that this too will benefit the tertiary institutions who have that as part of their program as well. And that is why this program is far, it is wide, it is deep, and it is beneficial. This is not a simple amendment, sir. This is an anti-crime amendment, sir. So I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East for bringing this amendment today to assist us for those many young people. I can't call the names, sir. I have not sought permission. So Nico and all of them that messaged me, sir, they will know that today is their day. Today is their demonstration that this administration is an administration with 2 ears and a heart to be able to act on their behalf. Sir, as I wrap up, I want to remind the public of Barbados, because they need to be reminded, that you had a former administration who, as my research, I have access to the files, sir. My research, am I speaking to stakeholders and persons in the sector? I could be hearing that they warned of this, that they were told in no uncertain terms that this is a backward step. This is a slap in the face of young people. This is a slap in the face of empowerment for this nation. They were told. They were told, and they were retold. And they closed their ears. No 2 ears and no heart. I am glad that I am part of an administration that does not behave in that way, sir. Sir, step by step, day by day, we are seeing improvements in this sector. And I would encourage the Ministry of Transport and Works, one or 2 of my very good friends, to continue in the direction and the trajectory that they're going. Obviously, they know me, and I can encourage them to go a little harder and go a little faster. I can't do anything different. Continue to consult with the sector. Continue to consult with the stakeholders. because it is extremely important to understand what it is you're doing. When we are appointed as ministers, when we are elected as elected officials of parliament, it does not automatically go to say that we know everything, we are the end and the beginning of knowledge. And that is why consultation is extremely important, because you have to use your management style and your discernment, but you need to get the information from the people on the ground. You need to get the information from the people in the sector to be able to make your decisions. And I want to encourage the Ministry of Transport and Works to continue on that vein. Because when you listen on the street, yes, you're hearing about improvements, but we know that there are challenges. If you ask anybody about up in the Pine, NTW, the Barbados Licensing Authority, they know that we still have somewhere to go. And there's a lot of Barbados and its revenue tied up there as well. And that is why it is important to ensure that we get it right. But even more important is that ease of doing business and that ability of the citizen to go there and not feel frustrated. Because at the end of the day, this is about people, people, people. And people must feel good when they interact with these agencies, sir. So we got some niggling issues also to look at, and I was glad when I hear the minister said that we're looking to do an overhaul of the Road Traffic Act Cap 295, which needs some amendments. And I like the idea of an overhaul because there've been a lot of tinkering and little amendments here. But when I look through the act, sir, I had to read it a number of times. Find myself on the wrong side of the traffic laws here and there in the former time. And sir, these things about you sell a bicycle and you don't sell it right, you could be charged $500. And you put in laws there just for people to make lawbreakers because you got laws you can't enforce. Either we can enforce it or we need to amend it because we are making lawbreakers unnecessarily. There's the niggling issue too with the handheld communication with the Barbados Citizen Band Radio. That they fell into the trap when we sought to amend the thing for the cell phones. All of these things, sir, I really hope that when we do the overhaul, that we can have a comprehensive overhaul of this act on behalf of the people of Barbados that we represent. And sir, I'm not even going to talk about the public service vehicles. I ain't talking about them at all today. I think it's an embarrassment. Over the years we've spoken about it, and I think it's time to act. I have no words for them. No words for them, sir. We know the damage that they did. We know the damage that they're doing. And we know the damage they will continue to do if we do not do something about it. We know it. And I ain't interested, sir, in who owned them or anything. I ain't interested in that debate. I just know the damage that we will facilitate if we do not do the job that the people sent us here to do. That is all I'm interested in, sir. All I'm interested in. So I say with that, sir, I believe that once and for all, we can put an end to the lawlessness on the road. I would like to see a highway and traffic patrol. People can tell me how we can pay for it. Let the fines pay for it. Either we get fines or we have a brilliantly operated road. Because when we don't pay attention to the small things, sir, when we don't pay attention to the seeds, sir, we got the trees to worry about. And these are not good trees. So we need to crack down on these small things. I want to see the highway code too. We update that one time. One of the things, one of my bugbears is driving on the road. You see hazard lights. You take somebody right now, you got to overtake. The really point hazard lights to put somebody to cross. No, they ain't doing any hand signal. They ain't doing the right turn so you don't overtake. The point hazard lights, you take the brake down, what you can do? Overtake, knock down somebody. All these little niggling things, sir. And we as an administration, we as a government, we have the responsibility. We were given the responsibility to improve each and every one of these things. So with that, sir, all that said, I want to say that I support this Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022, and I would like to see all the things that we've discussed here come to fruition, and I give it my full support. I am obliged, sir.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me at the outset thank those honourable members who have spoken, the honourable member for the city who just delivered his presentation, as well as the honourable member for Christchurch West Central. As I sat there listening to both of them, in particular the last speaker, it reminded me of something that I hold very dear in relation to this administration, which is that in everything that we do, we must have something that philosophically drives us and allows us to make decisions that are in the best interest of the people, sir. This seems as though it is a simple amendment, and both who have spoken, the honourable member for Christchurch West Central spoke to the issue of his journey in relation to training people and how this particular piece of legislation has impacted young people. The honourable member for the city has addressed the issue of how, as a party, we have tried to ensure that we empower young minds, that we allow people to be given an opportunity that they otherwise may not have access to. And it reminded me, sir, of a party that, again, has to have a philosophy behind it, because the philosophy in this simple amendment is empowerment of the people. It is a small catchment of people who apply for these licenses. But the truth of the matter is that we could have turned a deaf ear to the people who were crying out and saying that their children need to be able to be given this opportunity, or we could have turned a deaf ear to the tutors on these respective programs who have watched these young men and women become very capable in this area and who deserve the opportunity to be able to have a permit to be able to drive these heavy goods vehicles. We could have done that, sir. But when you have something which drives you, which is that you don't just listen to people, but you try to make the changes as quickly as is humanly possible, it reminds me of the fact that we have done so many other things to empower small classes of people over the course of our administration, sir. And in particular, when I think of things like the trust loans, we took risk on people who otherwise nobody else would have taken a risk on them. Sir, we, dating back to the forefathers of this party, we were able to empower people under the Tenantry Freehold Purchase Act, where people could buy land for 10 cents a square foot. Again, empowering a class of people who ordinarily would not be able to do for themselves. We have been able, during the COVID period, to put together things like the Household Mitigation Grant. We've been able to embark on trying to get 10,000 homes for people in this country, because we understand that in order to do better, we have to make life better for people. And we may not be able to accomplish all the things that we set about to do in the real time that we would want to do it, but we are still driven by a certain philosophy that says that we have to make life better for our people, sir. So in everything we have done, the Building Blocks program, taking young men and women off of the block, making them entrepreneurs, being able to transform a space which ordinarily people would not even give a second thought to, sir. We listened to that class of people. We listened to that group of people, and we said, no, we're going to pause, we've heard you, and we're going to go in and we are going to change your circumstances. And sir, today, therefore, as others have said, is significant in my mind, because this is another example of us listening. It is also another example of us being able to make the changes quickly. When we discovered what the issue was in September, some may say it wasn't fast enough, and I probably would have to agree, but the truth is these things take time, and as I've explained, the Road Traffic Act is a dynamic piece of legislation that constantly requires changes. You change one paragraph, you have to come back and change another in another section. So it is not as straightforward for the drafters as we would like it to be. Therefore, sir, as I said before, this reminds us that we must not do or respond in a knee-jerk way when things happen, that we still have to think through what we are doing, because our changes here legislatively will impact classes of people, and therefore I think it is a caution, not just for us as an administration, but certainly for future administrations as well. I want to agree with the member for Christchurch West Central in relation to the Barbados Driving Association. Again, they're doing an excellent job. And as I said before, they were the ones who raised the alarm, but also were able to come forward with a number of proposals which have not been lost, certainly on the licensing authority and certainly not on myself, in relation to being able to improve driving in this country. Not just for people who are trying to get a license for a heavy goods vehicle, but generally, how do we improve the standards on our roads for persons who want to learn to drive and drive anything? Because at the core of all that we're doing here is we're trying to not only empower, but we're also trying to make sure that our roads are safe for road users, both the ones who can drive the vehicles, but also for those who are going to be the users of the road as well. This amendment, sir, as I said, will empower, but I want to make it clear on the issue of this limit on the age. The truth of the matter is that while training is always going to be necessary for whatever you do, whether you be a lawyer, a doctor, whatever, training is necessary in everything, and retraining and retooling is equally important. I think that we have to acknowledge that there are some young people as well who, from the youngest age, the parents may be in construction or they know somebody in the neighborhood who got a couple of heavy goods vehicles, and they have learned to be able to master the art of driving those vehicles. And by they turn 18, having done the courses, they are ready and able and willing to be able to drive. Now, the truth of the matter is that those who have precious equipment that costs a lot of money, they may not be willing to empower an 18-year-old with a license fresh out of training to drive their equipment. And that is a choice that they will have to make. But what we must never do as an administration is to deny people the opportunity to be able to go through the training programs and to be able to go through the exercises that are necessary in order for them to be able to drive safely and to have the opportunity to earn a living, sir. And I therefore am grateful to those who at CPC have assisted with this, and certainly the Chief Legal Counsel in the Ministry of Public Works, and all of my colleagues who have weighed in, because many of them have also been affected by the suspension of the issuance of these permits, and I want to thank them as well for being able to raise the issues in a way that allowed us to quickly get this to Parliament and to bring some relief for this particular class of persons. And sir, I therefore want to beg that Your Honor, no? Sorry, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chair, I beg that Clause 1 do not pass.
The question is that Clause 1
Stand part.
stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 do not stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Clause 3 do not stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you do not report the passage of one bill in committee to the Speaker.
The question is that I do now report the passage of one bill in committee to His Honour the Speaker. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now cited as the passed and cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Act 2022.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 8, sir. In the name of the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Honourable Minister of Transport Works and Water Resources, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic, Learners Permit and Driving Licenses Validation Bill 2020.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
Clause 1.
So, Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
So, Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
3.
So, Chair, I beg to move that Clause 3 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
So, Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman of Committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Road Traffic Learners Permits and Driving Licenses Validation Act 2022.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honourable Senior Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Chapter 228, a compulsory acquisition by the state of a parcel of land situate at Bowles Plantation in the parish of Christchurch in this island for a public purpose, namely the erection of a water storage tank by the Barbados Water Authority.
Honourable Member Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to present to this Honourable House a acquisition by the state of some 3,802.7 square meters, or 40,932 square feet of land located at Balls in the parish of Christchurch. This land abuts the Rising Sun Reservoir, and this acquisition is most definitely necessary for a public purpose. Let me start, Mr. Speaker, by saying that access to water is absolutely a human right. Access to water is absolutely a human right. Water is important for life. Water is important for hygiene. Water is important for cooking. Water is important for keeping your surroundings clean. Water is important, I am being told by a heckler, for
Pay no attention.
for making certain libations which have an ability to change your mood. Water is important for all aspects of life, and it is absolutely clear that water and access to water is a human right. You know, Mr. Speaker, how human settlements have evolved over time. They all start near a water source. In many countries, they start near a river. Even in Barbados, even although our settlements have been along essentially salt water, the settlement of Barbados has been on the western side and the southern side, near to water. And before that, Bridgetown itself was settled because it was the estuary, what essentially was an estuary of a river. And water is important for life. Look at any major city across the world. The vast majority of them, from the Hudson River in New York to Boston, wherever you look for human settlements, they are always around the banks of a river, because access to fresh water is important for life. What happened after that for human settlement over the years is that man was able to develop ways of getting water inland. And that then allowed opportunities for settlements to be able to be set up in other areas other than on the banks of rivers. So piping, pumping, and reservoirs and tanks were developed that enabled then people to settle a little far inland and not have to have a daily access to rivers and by extension access to water in that way. And that is essentially how Barbados developed. So we started near the rivers, and then the people that were here at that time then developed piping systems along the road structure, pumping stations, and reservoirs, and that enabled people to develop more inland, like in St. George, St. Thomas, and all those areas, other inland areas of Christchurch, without having to have that daily access to water. Unfortunately, that piping and reservoir infrastructure has been in the ground or above ground for decades, sometimes maybe a century, some of our pipes. And obviously, like all things, they have deteriorated. So the piping has deteriorated, the reservoirs have deteriorated, to the point that there's a lot of what we call unaccounted for water. That unaccounted for water means that the Water Authority is pumping water, having know how much they pump, but the amount that is recorded at the meters, there's a discrepancy. So they pump more than they record at the meters. And that is unaccounted for water. And there are several reasons that we have unaccounted for water, but the biggest part of that, we believe, is due to losses, due to leaks because of a poor or deteriorating infrastructure, be it the pipes or the reservoirs and tanks. So what happened is the government of Barbados embarked on a program to reduce the unaccounted for water. And a big part of that was to be able to improve the infrastructure, improving the pipes and improving the reservoirs and the tanks. So we were able to engage the Caribbean Development Bank, and the Caribbean Development Bank was able to provide the government of Barbados with a loan. And that loan, I think it was in the order of $39.5 million. And what that loan was designed to do was be able to mitigate the challenges that were being experienced by the Water Authority and to address the issues related to the failing and aging infrastructure and the inefficiency that the Water Authority was experiencing. And that mainly was two or threefold. The first thing that was to do, obviously, was to start to change out the piping, and a certain amount of, I think it was 30 kilometers of piping was supposed to be changed out. Some has been changed out already. And the other part of it was be able to change out the above ground and below ground infrastructure, which is to be able to get tanks done and improve the reservoirs that the Water Authority was having. As well as there's another component which is dear to my heart, to be able to change out the cost of pumping the water from light and power to be able to give the Water Authority an opportunity to have a PV installation as well, to be able to mitigate the costs for pumping, because a big part of the bill for the Water Authority is electricity to pump all that water, millions and millions of gallons, across the country. So it was, I think it was a reasonable program, and it has had some success, some significant success so far. There have been quite a few of the installations that have already been done. Let me see if I can go through a few of them. Right, so Golden Ridge, the Golden Ridge Reservoir is in progress. Many of you would have seen that already. It is, I'm told, 85% complete. They're waiting now for the final waterproofing to be completed. Shop Hill is also in progress. It is 70% complete, and reinforced concrete beams are installed. Providence, 83% complete. Again, reinforced concrete roof and panels. Hanson, 99% complete. Worley, 99% complete. Half Acre, which is a tank as opposed to a reservoir, I'm told that it is approximately 99% complete. Indian Ground, 97% complete, awaiting final inspection. Mount Stepney, 97% complete. Elton, 97%. They've been working through to be able to improve the infrastructure for water storage as well as water transmission in this country. And that is an absolute plus, and that is a benefit for all the people of Barbados, because water is a human right. We saw in the pandemic, it was so important to be able to just wash your hands. Because imagine if we didn't have access to water and you couldn't wash your hands. It could be a matter of life and death. Because if you were unable to wash your hands, you were more at risk of getting the virus, and then by extension passing it on to a vulnerable person in your family. So it brought home more than ever, because not only is water for sustenance for the own body, but water and the ability to keep yourself clean and keep your hands clean and keep your surroundings clean could have been a matter for life and death. So I must salute the Barbados Water Authority for getting this program going and improving the infrastructure. I think it's been paying dividends. The parish of St. Joseph and St. John, I'm told, are getting better access to water now rather than the bad days when they were having great difficulty. So it's paying dividends, and I'm looking forward to seeing improvements in St. Lucie as well. I understand that they have some difficulties, but we're going to be going at this to make sure that the water infrastructure in this country continues to be improved constantly and consistently. However, one of the reservoirs that have to be done is the Rising Sun Reservoir. And let me focus now on the Rising Sun Reservoir because that is what this is about. Now, the Rising Sun Reservoir in particular, it provides the service to a large number of people. Packers, St. Patrick's, Yorkshire, Walruns, Lowthers, Searles, Fairview, Watton, Charnox, Corverley, the Grantley Adams Industrial Park, the Grantley Adams Airport, Fairy Valley, Parish Land, Pilgrim Road, Balls, Providence, Newton, Lodge Road, Kingsland, Silver Hill, Gall Hill, Kendall Hill, Maxwell, Caneville. It's almost the whole of Christchurch. It's almost the only part, funnily enough, in here, Mr. Speaker, is the great constituency of Christchurch West. And that's because that is serviced by a separate reservoir at the top of Britain's Hill, just off Reservoir Road, which happens to be in Christchurch West as well. So we got our own water and we got our own reservoir. And maybe hopefully we'll get that improved in the next program so that they continue to have a better and a wonderful reservoir. However, the Rising Sun Reservoir feeds a lot of people. A lot of people. And you got to understand, Christchurch is the second largest parish by population in this country, second only to St. Michael. So the number of people that live in Christchurch is huge. If you go by constituents, you know, as politicians and speaker, we think constituencies. 5 constituencies by 8,000 roughly, 40,000 people live in Christchurch. 40,000, second only to St. Michael. So, and if this reservoir, Rising Sun, is servicing those numbers of people, and we have to fix that, that means in order to fix it, you have to take it out of service. And if you're going to take a reservoir like that out of service, you can't focus it and fix it by another reservoir. So what the Barbados Water Authority engineers have said, what we have to do, we have to build it in redundancy, and we have to build a reservoir that will be used while this other reservoir is being fixed. I understand it's going to take about 5 to 6 months. Then when that one is fixed, then we end up with 2 reservoirs, which is great, because any engineer would tell you that redundancy is absolutely vital and important when you're designing a system, especially a system that is going to be servicing 40,000 people. So this is exactly what this resolution is about. It's so that we can have the land to be able to build a reservoir that is going to have 1.5 million gallons of water in it, so that if any issues happen for the people of Christchurch, they have that redundancy. And when the other reservoir comes on, it means that you're going to have the 1.5 million new one and the refurbished Rising Sun one simultaneously. So I think it's an excellent opportunity for the Barbados Water Authority to be able to build in redundancy and be able to enhance the ability for them to supply the people of Christchurch. And by extension, it's not only that supply, because how the water system is so designed is that if a reservoir in another location goes down or has to be fixed, they can transfer water they can do what called a water push and transfer from one to the next, so that we have that resiliency and we have that built-in ability to be able to get water to people, because water is a human right. And this has become even more important than ever because of the significance of what we hear now is climate change. And climate change is important, and it has impacted on our access to water. And what has happened is 2 things. Because of climate change, we get longer and more severe droughts. Longer and more severe droughts. That means that how we manage our water and how we manage our water resources have become even more critical. It means that there are longer spells without water, and the second part of it is when we do get rain, it tends to be greater volumes in a shorter space of time. So you also get more flooding as well. So climate change has had a significant impact on how we manage water and how water is treated across this country, indeed across the world. So this is very, very important. It is an acquisition. And you know, of course, whenever I do an acquisition, I always remember a former member for this house, Mr. Louis. And he would always say, you know, you can't land a plane on a plan. You got to land a plane on land. Well, the same thing applies to a water tank or a reservoir. You can't build it on a plan. You need land. And this acquisition, to be able to get that land at balls, it's only a small amount. It's not even, it's just under an acre. But even although it has a small footprint, it has a huge and important reach for thousands of people across this country. Because the opportunity or the wrong that would be done if we were to limit or reduce their access to water at a time when they would need it most would be a travesty. And at the end of the day, that is what a government is about. As a government is not only about tax and spend, it's not only about trying to get roads done, it's also about looking into the future. Trying to have that eyeglass that looks and sees what is possible and what do we have to do to mitigate any problems that may be coming down the pike. That is what good governance is about. And that's what this administration is about, doing the best for the people and by the people, so that at the end of the day, there's no disruption to their standard of life. There's no disruption to their ordinary lives. There's no disruption to them, and they are given opportunities to develop and be the best that they can be. So I think that this resolution is absolutely critical. It is a significant benefit for the people of the country. It will benefit the infrastructure. It will get us to a place where we are much more confident in our whole water infrastructure and give the Barbados Water Authority that opportunity to fix the Rising Sun Reservoir. Mr. Speaker, I am 55 now, and I don't know life without knowing that reservoir there. I don't know many people in this chamber would, because I know that that reservoir must be close to 100 years old. And I don't know how many times it was fixed, but obviously it would need a significant fixing, significant upgrading. And it's only fixing the reservoir. I would imagine they're going to overhaul the pumps. They will be putting in, if they don't have already, battery backup or generator backup, so that that reservoir is made in a condition to last another 50 to 100 years and to be able to supply the people of Christchurch. So this is, although a short resolution, a very, very important one, because what it does is it builds in that absolute resilience and enhancing the safety and efficiency of potable water supply for the system of Barbados. And I can't imagine that there could be any negative, but I can only see positives in this acquisition. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that this resolution do not pass.
Honourable Member Fernando.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Before I start, I want to ground this debate firmly in a climate change discourse, because I believe this is as much a debate on climate change, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, as it is a debate on land acquisition. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West made the point that water is a human right. And I believe that that warrants repeating, because it's indeed a human right, but more so, it is a precondition for life on this planet Earth. I've said it before that water is that sector that every other sector is heavily dependent on. Without water, there cannot be an agricultural sector. There cannot be a tourism sector. There cannot be a health sector. Any other sector that you can imagine cannot function without water. Water is critical and central to everything else. It's central to our socio-economic development. It's central to our food security. It's central to our ecosystems. Without water, none of these things can function. So what we have seen here on the part of the Barbados Water Authority is what we describe in industry as good water stewardship, good water governance and management, which is responsible use of water. Because we are faced for the first time with what is being referred to as a water crisis. And perhaps for the average person who goes and turns the tap, the faucet, and water flows freely, they may not believe that we are in a water crisis. They may not. There's some people in this country who have never experienced a water outage. There's some. But the fact remains that that is all because of good water stewardship and water governance on the part of the Barbados Water Authority. But I want to share with you the reality that we are operating within, and that is climate change and the impact that it's having on us as a country and by extension on this entire region and the world, as a matter of fact, and the world, because we're seeing countries that hitherto or years ago never had issues with droughts or water outages or severe flooding or anything like that. Now they're now experiencing these things. England, for example, I think I saw recently that they would have experienced a severe drought, something that they've never experienced before. They're seeing more intense rainfall and all such like. So we're having some strange weather patterns occurring across the globe, and that can only be attributed to climate change and global warming. Now I want to just look at how these things have impacted Barbados, and just to break them down into three major categories. I think the Honourable Member alluded to the fact that we are seeing a change in rainfall patterns. We're seeing a change where there's so much variability in rainfall patterns that we cannot now determine easily when the rainy season begins and when it ends. All like now we should be heading towards, the dry season, but we are seeing rains. Just, it was this week or last week, we saw flooding in parts of St. Philip. You don't associate that kind of flooding, that kind of rainfall in December going into January. But now we may very well have a rainy season that may run all the way into January. It's hard and becoming even harder to predict. So you're seeing this higher intensity of rainfall. And one may think that that is a good thing for us in the BWA. One may think that having heavy rain pretty much surcharges or flows at a much quicker rate or recharges at a much quicker rate the aquifers from which we get our water. The vast majority of our drinking water, as we have learned as children, comes from groundwater. So one may assume that if you have a lot of rain falling from the sky and it falls to the ground, it goes into the ground, then that will recharge the aquifers at a much faster rate. And nothing could not be further from the truth. In actual fact, what happens, like if you take a glass of water and you pour it on the ground, on the soil, if you throw it down with intensity, it's just going to run off the surface and it's going to flow away. And if it flows onto a concrete surface, just all the water is going to flow onto that concrete surface and go along. Same thing with rain. If it falls with certain intensity and you have flooding, a lot of the water is just going to flow right down into the sea. It's not going to percolate into the aquifers as it should and have that kind of recharge that we would expect with lighter rain or normal rainfall. So in what we think would happen, the opposite happens. So we just get a lot of runoff, and that negatively impacts the aquifer recharge. But at the same time, we are also seeing higher frequencies of droughts. And I just want to give you a sense of how bad the situation has gotten over the years when it comes to droughts. And sometimes we forget about these things because when the rains come, we forget that we had months and months of dryness when the whole country was looking all brown. Anyone in agriculture would not forget the dry years that we would have had. But I remember looking around Barbados and the entire country was brown. I live in the country where we see a lot of grassy areas, and those areas had all turned brown. And then we had grass fires all over the country, creating more problems for us with the limited amount of water we had. We had to use some of that water to then fight these grass fires. But just to give you a sense of the last 35 years or so, how many years were impacted by drought. We had drought in 1991. We had drought in 1993. 94. There was a drought in 1997. There was drought in 2002. Drought in 2007. Drought in 2009. There was a severe drought between 2014 and 2016. I remember that particular drought of 2014, 2016. I remember that year, especially 2015, because almost for the entire year where I live in Orange Hill in St. James, the water was off. For almost an entire year. I remember the truck coming around and people out there with 10 and 15 buckets waiting to catch water because you would only get water running through your pipes maybe for a few hours or a day, or maybe a day or two. But then for the rest of the week, you were without water. You had to depend on the truck. This was before the proliferation of the community tanks, which is something that we are turned our back on and would never want to return to. But this was before that time. And we would depend on the water tanker. We call it water tanker. Gone into St. Andrew, discovered it's called a VAT, but we call it water tanker or water truck when we were young people growing up in Orange. And I remember 2014, 2015, because of the severity of that particular drought and having to go home from work in the afternoon and hope to catch the water truck in the community so I can get some water. I was living alone at the time, so I could get some water from the 5 or 6 buckets that we always kept in our house as people who grew up in the country. Because water outages they were a way of life for us, especially during the crop season, when I got to discover that some of the water was pulled off the system to cool down the turbines at the factory there at Portville. It was just nearby. But whatever reason it was, we knew to expect water outages for a few days at most during those summer months, during those months when the crop was ongoing. But 2014, 2015 was different. Because rather than having 4 days of water outages, we probably had 4 days of water in our tap. And every other day in the year were outages. So that was an extremely severe period for us. But we got over that. And then again in 2019, we saw another year that was characterized as a drought. And I suspect that is what pushed government in 2021 to look really at upgrading our water infrastructure and building in that increased redundancy, that improved resilience within our system that gave rise to what we are discussing here this afternoon, and that is the building of water storage facilities to improve the service to certain areas in Barbados. This one in particular, it treats to Christchurch, but we have done the same, particularly in the north and along that eastern corridor of Barbados. But I want, before I go into that, just speak to another aspect of climate change before I speak to this particular acquisition. And that is, I would have dealt with high frequency of droughts, I would have dealt with the high intensity of the rainfall, but I also want to look at the increase in temperature. We've seen how climate change has resulted in outside being hotter. In fact, this morning was perhaps one of the hottest mornings
hottest days I've experienced in a long time. I was in my car, went to visit a family there in Farmers, and I literally had to run because it was so hot. I've never experienced heat like that any time before in Barbados, but this year was extremely hot. And that is having an adverse impact also on our water storage and our water infrastructure. Certainly in agriculture, I mean, we've been seeing a lot of rain recently, so you will not feel it right now, but I'm sure during the dry months, the agricultural sector is heavily impacted by this increase in temperature. Yes. This increase in temperature that negatively impacts the irrigation of crops in those spaces. So we've seen that, and at the same time, we have seen saltwater intrusion, an increase in saline and the salinity of water, especially along the western coastal area. The wells that are close to the western coast of Barbados have experienced over the years, certainly in 2019, 2018, 2020, 2021, an increase in salinity where the rising of the sea levels has impacted that thin lens of fresh water that one can pull from along the western coast. So we're having problems coming at us from all angles as a direct result of climate change that are negatively impacting our ability to produce clean, safe drinking water. But we have not thrown out our hands in despair. We have shown our resilience. We have adapted, and we have put mitigation measures in place to ensure that Barbadians can enjoy a high quality of potable or drinking water. Which brings me back to this particular acquisition in Balls Plantation. The process would have started back in 2021 because it was felt that that area being as large as it is, the honourable member just indicated to the House that at least 40,000 persons live within that space, and it would also include parts of St. Philip, I've noticed. So include parts of St. Philip West and St. Philip North. All right, will be impacted by that. So perhaps there are more than 40,000, maybe 50,000 persons in that catchment area, which says to me that that is an extremely important, extremely large catchment area. And even though it was not part of the original plan, under I just want to get the name right. We have the names, and we call them by. I call this particular one WhatsApp, but it's really Water Supply Network Upgrade Project. It was not under that original scope of work. It was felt by management within the Barbados Water Authority that this particular area should be added because of the sheer importance and the sheer number of persons serviced by this particular reservoir. But as the honourable member indicated, one could not pull this reservoir out of service because this whole system would collapse. If we were to pull, we had to sequence it in such a way that while we are building one reservoir, the original reservoir will still be in service, and when that reservoir is completed, we can just transition to a new reservoir. Now, within the sector, there are certain things that you learn about water and the hydraulic characteristics of water. You understand that there are certain areas, because of their elevation, are impacted more by water outages and low water pressure than others. Now, for us who live in the center or the north of the country, north, the center, St. Thomas, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, we have very high elevations. So areas like Hillaby, White Hill, Mount Hillaby, areas like Rock Hall, these areas have always struggled with low water pressure and water outages. I'm thankful that in some cases, some of those areas have been remedied. I know in St. John, they've been remedied with the Vineyard Project. Also, there's also Castle Grant, which is soon going to come come online, and that will remedy some of the issues in St. Joseph, also in St. Andrew, because we are at the very end of that particular system, and Wood Hill is impacted with that system. But those elevated areas are always the first to lose water, and they're the last to get water or regain water when the pipe is back on or when the water returns. And in Christchurch, I've come to understand, also has some elevated areas that are often impacted when there's low water levels in the reservoir. So places like Newton, I jotted it down here, let me just think. Kingsland and Southern Heights are some of the more elevated areas in Christchurch, which I've always seen as a very flat place. But for the purpose of that particular pump, Hampton, and this Rising Sun reservoir, it has always been problematic to get water to those places in those areas. And with this new tank, which would also come with upgrades such as a booster station, it is anticipated with a new booster station in place, we can also pump water to those areas with a certain degree of force or pressure that would ensure that persons in those areas will have good water pressure like the rest of Barbados. Of course, there's a downside to upgrading infrastructure of this type. As was said earlier, many of our mains are age. And by age, they are 100 years plus. So we have to switch out those older mains with newer, more flexible mains that are more seamless, because the more joints that you can find on the main, that's the area is most likely to fail. So the more joints you have, the more likely your main will fail. And we compound that with age, then you have a recipe there for disaster. And let me tell you that when I have seen some of these bursts, you hear about a main burst because it's old, it's made of that old cast iron, it bursts. You think it's a small burst that you see on your holes or in your community, you see water squirting from a small little hole in those blue pipes. But in actual fact, when we go and we go into the gullies sometimes, because it happens sometimes in gullies, sometimes we don't know where these ruptures happen until we see large lakes form or large pools of water form. And we go and we investigate and we see the size of the hole. So then the hole is the size of this phone I have in my hand. And you can imagine how much water is lost from those ruptures in those holes. And because of that, the pressure does not get to the households, and households complain, and we get an increase in pressure reduction. So we are upgrading all of our main infrastructure. Of course, part of this program will see at least 30 kilometers of mains being replaced, which is a significant amount, and it will take a decently long time, because replacing mains is not only time consuming, but it's also very expensive. In fact, it costs about $1 million per kilometer to change a main. So we're looking at like 30 million or so investment in just changing mains out in Barbados. 1 million per kilometer. And we have a lot of mains, especially in the north of the country, that we have to change. So what we will see invariably is that when we start to upgrade our tanks, we have at the same time to go and change out our mains, because the increased pressure within the pipe that these new pumps are pushing out will damage those old 100-year cast iron mains. It will happen. And we will get, for a little while afterwards, we will see perhaps proliferation of burst mains across the country. But we are working very hard to get those mains repaired and get as many of them changed out as possible, because we understand how the dynamics of water and how it works. And it's also important to change the ones, even those that are further away from the pumping stations, that are not necessarily impacted by new pumping infrastructure or new water infrastructure. We still have to change them, because with the climate change and the impact it's having on the ground and the differential in the soils, that is also having an impact on our pipes that are buried, our 100-year-old mains that are buried in the ground. it doesn't take a lot to rupture an old piece of pipe that's sometimes being held together by the very soil that it is in. Sometimes that's the only thing that's keeping it together. And if that's at the same differential or shift in that soil, whether it be from warming, the extraction that happens as a result of heating or warming, then that pipe is going to rupture in its weakest point. So these are all things that we are working towards within the Barbados Water Authority. We are, of course, looking at an island-wide strategic main replacement program. Even as part of this program, we are not only building this one reservoir, we are also looking at perhaps another 10 reservoirs and 7 steel water tanks. If you go around Barbados, especially north, you see these humongous black water tanks spraying up. And then you're seeing some concrete water tanks, and you see there's one in Ipsil, there's one Castle Grant in St. Joseph, it's right next to the road, it's huge. You see one there in Lodge Hill. You're seeing them all over Barbados. And the reason for this is for that added redundancy. We're going to need it going forward. All of the projections are saying that in the next 20 to 30 years, it's going to be hotter, it's going to be warmer. Barbados is going to be more stressed than it already is. And let me give you a sense of how stressed we are as a water scarce country. We often hear that we are a water scarce country, but we have not seen the numbers to get a clear understanding as to how bad it is. Standard for any country, it's 1,000 cubic meters of water per person. That is the standard. We are currently at 310. I have seen numbers around 390 cubic meters of water per person. So we are operating at a third of where we should be as it relates to water. So that's why we are considered like the 15th most water scarce country in the world. And I suspect the other 14 or so under there are probably arid countries, deserts and all such like. So we are right up there with those water scarce countries, those countries that most part of the country, or most part of the country is desert. So you understand what we are facing. People must understand what we are doing, the effort that's being made in terms of managing our water infrastructure. It's extremely important. And we're not doing it for us, this generation, we're doing it for future generations. Because these mains that we lay here, our great-grandchildren will be the ones benefiting from these. Like we are benefiting from the ones that were laid 100 years ago. We are at the tail end of those. We are seeing the downside of them, of course, now, but they have given us 100 years of service. And we hope with this new technology and this more flexible climate proof infrastructure, that we can have these mains for at least another 100+ years, so that our great-grandchildren will be having clean drinking water as a result of decisions made today by this government to improve our infrastructure, which by all accounts is very, very expensive. But water infrastructure is expensive by its nature. It's extremely expensive, but it's extremely critical. And the thing is, we all take it for granted. A lot of us take water for granted. In fact, many people do not know where water comes from and the efforts that are made to ensure that the water is clean. They just turn the pipe and the water is there, it looks clean, and they're satisfied with that. But they don't know the efforts that are being made every day, people working around the clock, 24 hours a day, to ensure that we have a clean water supply. I remember back, I think it was in April, when we had some challenges over at the Bell pumping station. And I would admit that as a child, I never knew where water came from. I heard we got water from wells, but I never knew that water actually came from a well, which was just a hole in the ground. I actually thought that water came up and then went into some sort of laboratory, was cleaned and sanitized, and then was pumped to our homes. I did not know that it came directly from the ground, straight into the reservoirs. Of course, it is added chlorine added to it well in the well, So it's sanitized right there in the well, but then it's pumped into a reservoir or storage tank, and then it's pumped to our homes. I did not know it was that was part of the process. I did not know the science involved in it. There's a lot of things I learned on that day about water that I had to appreciate those workers at the Barbados Water Authority. Yes. I mean, apart from the danger, because you are working around a well that's 160 feet deep or so, between 140 to 160 feet deep. Picture a well. Our homes are 20 feet deep. And those present, did you imagine that well 10 times over? Or close to 10 times or 8 times over. You have a well that is 140 to 160 feet deep, and people have to work around that every single day, ensuring that we have clean drinking water. And I saw a level of camaraderie where those men were working from morning to night, in some cases without getting any sleep. During COVID. During COVID, when people were home, some of them were complaining, were asking, were saying that they didn't know what they were doing. All these things I was hearing, grumbling. But yet I saw men literally putting their lives on the line, working in conditions that anyone would consider to be dangerous or unsafe conditions, to ensure that that water infrastructure was repaired and put back in place, that at least, it was 30%, which is around 100,000 people in the Bridgetown area, and Bridgetown, St. George area, would have drinking water. I saw that. That is what the BWA is doing. I believe that, and it was said then, and I would say now, the story of water has to be told in this country. The history of water and the struggle of water over the years, and the struggle that water will face going forward. That story has to be told, because we take water for granted. We take water for granted, and it is only when we turn on the taps and we just get the air or nothing, it's when we realize how important water is. And it's important to us as people. Within this project, there's a component that deals with how water impacts gender. And sometimes you don't, as a man, you don't really think about things, but the member for Christchurch West, he alluded to it, and working with a female minister, sometimes you are reminded that sometimes things impact females or women in more than they impact men, or in different ways. Can you imagine as a woman living in a house and there's no water? Yes, for us, we know we use it to wash and we use it to cook and we use it to clean, but they have added issues that require hygienic conditions. It requires clean water. And a lack of clean water can negatively impact their health in ways that would not necessarily impact us as men. So women are more vulnerable to water outages than men. When I go into communities, and we've had many outages in my community before our issues were fixed. I don't like to say it because I got in a meeting about 2 weeks ago and said that we were no longer getting water problems in Orange where I live, and the next day, pipe was off. So I don't want, but that was a direct result of the maintenance at the Ionics desalination plant in Spring Garden, on Spring Garden. But then, within a couple of days, then there was the fire. So the pipe was off again. So I don't want to put my mouth on it, but our problems were fixed. But I remember going around from household, and I would hear the cries of the females especially, that, certain times of the month, it's extremely difficult for them to be in a household, and there's no water. They have to bathe in a pan. And that's difficult for them during that time. So they're extremely vulnerable. So that's why within this component, this project, we have a component to sensitize persons on how gender is impacted by water outages and, in fact, by climate change. So as I wrap up, I just want to, because I felt I needed to get some of that off my chest working around water and appreciating water in the way that I've appreciated it. I just want to say that climate change presents a clear and present danger for us as, not only as inhabitants of this island Barbados, but for us as a species on this earth. But at the same time, it offers us an opportunity to put in place or to transform our systems through good water stewardship, through good water governance, through good water management. We can now use this opportunity now to improve on the systems that we have had in place that have served us so well for the last 100 years, to ensure that they serve us well for another 100, maybe 200 years, and ensure the future and the prosperity and development of this country for our future generations. And with those few words, I want to associate myself with this resolution and to give it my full support. Mr. Speaker, I am obliged.
Honourable Member for Gracious West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, as I seek to wrap up this resolution. First, let me thank the Honourable Member for St. Andrew for his contribution to the debate. And let me say, as he spoke about the difficulties at the pumping station at the Bell, it reminded me of those very long nights that we were there together. The minister was out of the jurisdiction at the time, and as Minister for Infrastructure, the two of us were there every night with the men as they worked. And you know, sometimes when you hear somebody say 160 feet, people don't understand 160 feet. But let me see if I could break it down. A story on a building is 10 feet. So you imagine a building 16 stories tall. There is no other building in Barbados 16 stories tall, Mr. Speaker. None. But the depth of that well is equivalent to a building 16 stories tall, double the height of the tallest building in Barbados, which is about 8 stories, the Central Bank of Barbados. And men went into that well to be able to fix that well. And let me explain to you why men went into that well. The well has a pump on top of it. The pump has pipes that go down underneath. Those pipes weigh tons. It's not a pipe that you see like a garden hose, Mr. Speaker. It's a pipe 16, 18 inches in diameter, made of metal. And it goes 100 feet down, 150 feet down. It weighs tons. Those men had to go and separate that pipe, remove the pump on top of it, because the whole system that supported it was in danger. And if that had collapsed, that whole pumping system and tanks would have crashed into the well. That is what we were up against. And that is what those men were able to do. I remember running over to Kentucky so the men had something to eat. And Kentucky must want to know how come their sales went up so much. But we had to keep working because so much was at risk. If that well infrastructure had gone down, we would have had water issues for months, rather than for the few days. And let me thank the people of Barbados for enduring and bearing with us over those few days, because we were able to get that support fixed and up and running yet again. Also, another thing that we didn't mention is because we're a water scarce country, I want to encourage more people to use water conservation devices as well. And they're more available now. There are some devices that you can add to your faucet, which will add a little air, is a more air-water mixture, and reduces the volume of water that you use on the faucet. There are bags that you can add into the toilet, for argument's sake, the toilet tank, that reduce the amount of water that is used on a flush. Things like that. When you have a leak, get it fixed, because the cost of the water and the cost of the water for the country is huge. So all of these things, check, sometimes turn off everything and check your meter to see if you have a leak that you don't know about. You know, sometimes when Speaker, I know it's happened to me, I don't know if it ever happened to you, but we have people, constituents come and say, I get a water bill for $1,000. And I said, well, that's because you have a leak somewhere. It may be under the ground. Have you been checking? Have you been monitoring? And all these things we have to do because water is a scarce commodity. And you know, there's an old adage in Barbados, you never miss the water till the well runs dry. And you know, when there is no water coming out your tap is when you miss it most. And that is why it is so important that we recognize this scarce water and that we maintain it. So this 1.5 million gallon reservoir, in the short term, it will help us to maintain the supply to the hydraulic network to customers, and in the long term, it will provide mitigation of water supply outages, which may be caused by issues with pumping or in the maintenance of repairs to the pipe network, as well as providing redundancy and additional hours of supply. So with this backup source, the Barbados Water Authority would be required to erect, if we did not have it, if we did not put this reservoir in place, what that would mean? That would mean that while we were repairing Rising Sun, we'd have to be putting in community tanks in Christchurch. We'd have to be trucking water. We'd have to be trucking water all across the various constituencies. And clearly, that is not something that we want to see. Imagine trucking to 40,000 people or putting up community tanks all across Christchurch. It's not something we'd want to see. So therefore, in their wisdom, they've said, let us acquire this land. Let us put up a tank that will build in resiliency and have it while we're doing the fix, and then have a larger reservoir opportunity for the future. So an excellent opportunity. I want to thank the member of St. Andrew yet again for making an excellent presentation, and I want to commend this resolution in this House and ask that this resolution do not pass.
Question that this resolution do not pass. All those are members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Friday, the 16th of December at 10 a.m.
By the second.
The question that this Honourable Chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 16th day of December at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The meeting, the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 16th day of December, 2022 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.